China now has 3 aircraft carriers, the Liaoning, the Shandong, and as of November 2025, the Fujian, the most advanced carrier China has ever built, equipped with electromagnetic catapults, carrying 5th-generation stealth fighters, commissioned in a ceremony attended personally by Xi Jinping. And the Pentagon just revealed that China plans to have 9 aircraft carriers by 2035. 9. The United States currently operates 11. On paper, this looks like a naval arms race that China is winning, or at least catching up fast. But here is the question nobody in Chinese state media wants to answer honestly. If those 3 carriers, all 3 of them together, sailed into a confrontation with a single American carrier strike group, what would actually happen? Not in a parade, not in a press release, in a real fight. The answer is going to surprise you, because it's not as simple as counting ships. To understand why China's carrier fleet is both genuinely impressive and fundamentally limited, you need to understand what an aircraft carrier actually does. Most people think an aircraft carrier is a weapons platform, a floating air base that you sail toward your enemy and launch planes from. That's part of it. But the real purpose of an aircraft carrier, the reason the United States has built them for 80 years, is power projection. The ability to take a credible military threat and move it anywhere on Earth within days, without needing permission from any country, without needing a base on foreign soil, without being dependent on anyone else's infrastructure. An aircraft carrier strike group is not just a ship. It's a self-contained military ecosystem, the carrier itself. Cruisers and destroyers for air defense and strike missions. Submarines running underneath, invisible. Supply ships that can keep the whole group operating for months. And above it all, a combat air patrol of fighters that can reach out hundreds of miles in every direction. The United States has been building, operating, and fighting with carrier strike groups since World War II. That's 80 years of institutional knowledge, 80 years of learning what works, what fails, how to supply a carrier at sea, how to coordinate its air wing with surface ships and submarines, how to project power 10,000 miles from home and sustain it indefinitely. China has been doing this seriously for about 15 years. That gap, not in ships, not in hardware, but in experience, doctrine, and operational depth, is the real story of the China versus United States carrier competition. Let's look at each of China's 3 carriers honestly. The Liaoning is China's oldest carrier. She was originally a Soviet vessel, the Varyag, laid down in Ukraine in the 1980s for the Soviet Navy. When the Soviet Union collapsed, construction stopped. The unfinished hull sat rusting in a Ukrainian shipyard for years before China purchased it in 1998, officially claiming it would be converted into a floating casino. It was not converted into a floating casino. China spent over a decade rebuilding and refitting the Varyag from the keel up, commissioning her as the Liaoning in 2012. She is conventionally powered, displaces around 60,000 tons, and uses a ski jump ramp to launch aircraft rather than a catapult. Here is why that matters. A ski jump launch means the aircraft is using its own engine power to get airborne off the ramp. There is no external energy helping it. This severely limits how much fuel and weapons an aircraft can carry when it launches. A J-15 fighter taking off from the Liaoning ski jump cannot carry a full weapons load and a full fuel load at the same time. It has to choose. That means shorter range, fewer weapons, or both. American carriers use catapults, originally steam-powered, now electromagnetic on the newest ships, that physically accelerate the aircraft to flying speed before it leaves the deck. The plane can be fully loaded with fuel and weapons and still get airborne. This is not a small difference. It fundamentally changes what the carrier's air wing can do in a real fight. The Liaoning today is considered primarily a training carrier. China has been open about this. She has been used to develop the doctrine, the crew skills, the procedures for operating a carrier. She is valuable, but she is not a frontline war-fighting asset in the way an American carrier is. The Shandong is China's second carrier and first domestically built one. Commissioned in 2019, she is based heavily on the Liaoning's design with improvements, a slightly better ski jump angle, a larger hangar, more aircraft capacity, a smaller and more efficient island superstructure. She displaces around 70,000 tons, but she still uses a ski jump. She still has the same fundamental limitation on what her aircraft can carry when they launch. She is a more capable ship than the Liaoning, but she is operating under the same basic constraint. And then there is the Fujian. The Fujian changes the conversation. Commissioned in November 2025, she is genuinely impressive. Over 80,000 tons, the largest warship ever built outside of the United States. And crucially, she does not use a ski jump. She uses electromagnetic catapults, the same technology as America's newest carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford. Electromagnetic catapults mean the Fujian's aircraft can launch at full fuel and weapons load. Her air wing, which includes J-35 stealth fighters, J-15T heavy fighters, and KJ-600 early warning aircraft, can operate at their full potential range and payload. This is a genuine leap forward for Chinese naval aviation. The Pentagon called the Fujian's commissioning one of the most significant Chinese military developments of 2025. So why isn't this the end of the story? Why can't China just point at the Fujian and say, "We have caught up"? Because having the hardware is only the beginning. Here is what the Fujian does not have yet. She does not have a full air wing embarked. As of early 2026, Chinese officials have confirmed that full deployment of carrier-based aircraft will happen, but they have not said when. The ship has conducted successful catapult launches during sea trials. But running sea trials with aircraft is different from operating a fully combat-ready air wing at sea for weeks at a time. She does not have combat experience. Neither do any of China's carriers. The Liaoning and the Shandong have conducted exercises. They have sailed into the South China Sea. In October 2025, they conducted China's first ever dual carrier drill, both ships operating together for the first time. These are meaningful milestones, but they are not the same as the experience accumulated by a crew that has operated in the Persian Gulf, the Mediterranean, the Western Pacific, and the Indian Ocean across decades of real-world deployments. She does not have a proven escort fleet optimized for carrier strike group operations. China has been building destroyers and cruisers at a remarkable pace. The Type 055 cruiser is a world-class surface combatant by any measure. But integrating all of these ships into a coherent carrier strike group, with the communications, the tactics, the practiced coordination between surface, subsurface, and air, takes years of sustained exercise and operational deployment. And she does not have a global logistics network. This is perhaps the least exciting limitation, but one of the most important. The United States can keep a carrier strike group operating indefinitely anywhere on Earth because it has the supply ships, the overseas bases, the tanker aircraft, and the logistics infrastructure to support it. If an American carrier in the Philippine Sea needs fuel, food, and ammunition, there is a system in place to provide them, at sea, without the carrier having to return to port. China is building this capability. But right now, it does not have it. China's carriers are regional assets. They can project power in the Western Pacific, particularly around Taiwan and the South China Sea. But sustained global power projection, the kind the United States exercises routinely, is not yet within China's reach. Now let's look at what an American carrier strike group actually brings to a confrontation. Take the USS Theodore Roosevelt, a Nimitz-class carrier operating in the Pacific. She displaces over 100,000 tons, significantly larger than the Fujian. She is nuclear-powered, meaning she never needs to refuel. She can operate for over 20 years on a single nuclear fuel load. She can sprint at over 30 knots and maintain high speed for extended periods without worrying about fuel consumption. Her air wing carries around 65 to 70 aircraft, F/A-18 Super Hornets for strike and air combat, EA-18G Growlers for electronic warfare, jamming enemy radar and communications, E-2D Hawkeyes for airborne surveillance and battle management, with radar that can see for hundreds of miles in every direction. MH-60 helicopters for anti-submarine warfare, and increasingly F-35C stealth fighters, the most capable carrier-based aircraft in the world. Around the carrier, a typical strike group includes at least one Ticonderoga-class cruiser and 2 to 3 Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers. The Arleigh-Burke carries 96 vertical launch cells, each cell loaded with a missile, standard air defense missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range of over 1,000 miles, anti-submarine rockets. These ships can engage aircraft, missiles, submarines, and land targets simultaneously. Beneath the strike group, 1 or 2 Los Angeles or Virginia-class submarines. The submarines are the most dangerous element that nobody talks about. They are invisible, they are quiet, and they carry weapons that can sink carriers. The American submarine force has been refined over decades to work in coordination with carrier strike groups. Chinese forces cannot reliably detect and track American submarines in the open ocean. This is a documented capability gap that China has been trying to close for years. And above everything, the E-2D Hawkeye. This aircraft is a flying radar station and battle management center. It gives the strike group commander a picture of everything happening in the air and on the sea for hundreds of miles in every direction. It can coordinate the entire air battle from that picture. China's older carriers, the Liaoning and the Shandong, have no equivalent. They rely on helicopter-based radar, which is significantly less capable. The Fujian's KJ-600 fixed-wing early warning aircraft changes this, but it has not yet been proven in operational conditions. So what happens if these forces meet? The honest assessment from American naval analysts is that in a straight blue water confrontation, open ocean, far from Chinese shores, a single American carrier strike group would very likely defeat all 3 Chinese carriers combined. The reasons come down to several fundamental advantages. First, submarine warfare. American attack submarines are quieter, more capable, and more experienced than their Chinese counterparts. In any serious naval confrontation, American submarines would be attempting to establish firing positions against Chinese carriers from the first hours of the conflict. China's anti-submarine capability, while improving, would struggle to keep up. Second, electronic warfare and battle management. The EA-18G Growler is the most advanced electronic warfare aircraft in the world. In a real fight, it would be working to jam Chinese radar, disrupt Chinese communications, and degrade the ability of Chinese ships and aircraft to coordinate. China has no direct equivalent operating from its carriers today. Third, the air-to-air gap. The F/A-18 Super Hornet, and especially the F-35C, are extremely capable fighters. China's J-15 has known limitations. It has been described by some Chinese analysts as being underpowered relative to what it needs to carry full weapons loads. The J-35 is newer and more capable, but it is still being integrated onto the Fujian and has not been tested in real air combat conditions against a peer adversary. Fourth, experience. This word comes up constantly in any honest analysis of Chinese versus American carrier warfare. The United States Navy has been doing this for 80 years. It has fought carrier battles, lost carrier battles, learned from them, and built a doctrine refined by actual combat. China is 15 years into carrier operations. That gap does not close in 5 years. It might not close in 20. But here is where the analysis gets more complicated. China was never planning to fight its carriers in a straight blue water battle against the American Navy. The entire framework of Chinese naval strategy is built around the concept of anti-access and area denial, what American planners call a 2AD. The idea is this: instead of trying to out-carrier the United States, you make the area around China so dangerous for American carriers that they cannot operate there effectively. China has spent decades and billions of dollars building the weapons and systems for exactly this purpose. The DF-21D and DF-26 ballistic missiles, called carrier killers by Western analysts, are designed to hit moving ships at sea with ranges of over 1,000 miles. They fly on a ballistic trajectory that makes them extremely difficult to intercept. No one knows for certain how effective they would be in actual combat conditions, but the threat is real enough that American carrier strike groups now have to consider operating further away from China's coast than they used to. Hundreds of land-based anti-ship cruise missiles, shore-based radar and surveillance systems covering the entire Western Pacific. A submarine fleet that, while less capable than America's in open ocean warfare, is more formidable in the shallow coastal waters around China and Taiwan. Long-range fighter aircraft operating from land bases that can reach American ships before those ships can respond. In this framework, China's carriers are not expected to defeat American carriers in open battle. They are expected to project power into zones that American carriers have already been pushed back from, to enforce Chinese claims in the South China Sea and around Taiwan, to serve as the visible symbols of Chinese power in waters that China considers its own, and to be the first step, the first generation, the foundation for the 9-carrier fleet that the Pentagon says China is building toward 2035. Here is what that future looks like. China's 4th carrier, Type 004, is believed to be nuclear-powered. If confirmed, it would be a fundamental change. Nuclear propulsion eliminates the fuel limitation that constrains all 3 of China's current carriers. A nuclear carrier does not need to return to port to refuel. It can sustain operations indefinitely. It can sprint faster and longer than a conventionally powered ship. If China fields 5 or 6 nuclear-powered carriers with mature air wings, experienced crews, and a fully developed logistics and escort network, which the Pentagon believes could happen by the mid-2030s, the gap narrows dramatically. Not because China will have surpassed American carrier capability, but because the United States cannot be everywhere at once. 11 carriers sounds like a lot until you realize that at any given time, several are in maintenance, several are in training cycles, and only 3 or 4 are actually deployed and ready to fight. If China has 9 carriers with several permanently based in the Pacific, the regional balance shifts. This is why the Pentagon is worried. Not about today, about 2035. The United States is not standing still either. The USS Gerald R. Ford, America's newest carrier, commissioned in 2017, represents a generational leap. Electromagnetic catapults, advanced weapons elevators, a smaller crew than the Nimitz class due to automation, more aircraft sorties per day than any previous carrier. The Ford class is designed to operate into the 2060s and 2070s. The F-35C is still being deployed in greater numbers across the fleet. The MQ-25 Stingray, an unmanned aerial tanker, is entering service, extending the range at which carrier aircraft can operate. And the American submarine force, which has no Chinese equivalent in open ocean capability, continues to be modernized. The real competition is not between ships. It is between 2 different theories of how naval warfare will work in the 2030s and 2040s. China is betting on missiles, area denial, and quantity. The United States is betting on technology, experience, and the ability to project power globally. Both bets have logic behind them. Neither side knows for certain which will prove correct in actual combat. Let's come back to the original question. China has 3 aircraft carriers. The United States has 1. Why can't China's 3 beat America's 1? The honest answer is that it's the wrong question. China's carriers are genuinely capable. The Fujian in particular represents a real achievement. A ship that 5 years ago most Western analysts said China could not build. They were wrong, and China built it. But capability on paper is not the same as capability in battle. A carrier that has never fought is a different instrument than one operated by a navy with 8 decades of hard-won institutional knowledge. A carrier that cannot yet field its full air wing is different from one that deploys with 65 combat-ready aircraft. A carrier that depends on land-based logistics is different from one that can sustain itself at sea for months anywhere on the planet. Today, in 2026, a single American carrier strike group almost certainly defeats all 3 Chinese carriers in open ocean combat. The experience gap, the submarine advantage, the electronic warfare capability, and the global logistics network are simply too large to overcome with hardware alone. By 2035, if China executes its 9-carrier plan, if it solves its logistics problems, if its crews accumulate real operational experience, and if its anti-submarine and electronic warfare capabilities mature, the gap will be smaller. How much smaller, nobody can say with confidence. What is certain is that the era of unquestioned American naval dominance in the Pacific is ending. Not because the United States Navy is getting weaker, but because China is getting stronger faster than most people expected. The Fujian sailing out of Sanya Harbor on November 5, 2025, with Xi Jinping standing on the flight deck, was not just a military event. It was a statement about where China intends to be in 10 years. The United States heard it. The question is whether the response will be fast enough. If this analysis gave you something to think about, subscribe to Naval War Room. We cover naval warfare, advanced weapons systems, and the geopolitical flashpoints that are reshaping the world. New videos every day. The next one is already coming.